All right, so today we're working on two value scales. One of the value scales we're going to do is going to be in red, and one of them is going to be in blue. So I've already pre-prepared, I guess that pre-prepared is redundant, I've already prepared palettes for you with all the colors that you're going to need on them. And what you'll see when you go over there is I've actually labeled palettes with your names on them. I want you to obviously take the one with your name on it, and you're just going to keep that palette for the rest of the semester so that when we're finished today working on this, you'll just wash it off and put it on your shelf so that when we continue using paint, you'll just have one that you always use, and I'm not having to sanitize them every time we switch them around and stuff. You just have your own germs, and that's it. So you'll have a palette. You're gonna, just like when we painted before, you're gonna need a container of water and a paintbrush. Remember that it's important to choose a good size brush. I actually have these nicer synthetic paintbrushes that I'm gonna pass out and let you use today. The one kind of asterisk by using these is that when you're finished with them, instead of putting them in the box to be sanitized, which I'll sanitize them myself, but you're gonna bring these directly back to me. You'll wash them and give them to me so that I can check and make sure they were cleaned properly before they're sanitized. So I'll hand these out in a little bit. So when I show you this demonstration today, I'm only going to do one of them because this process and the steps are the same, you know, for the blue and for the red. So you don't really need to, we don't need to waste your time you watching me do both. So I'm going to do the red. So I'm going to take, before I even start mixing anything, this one here in the middle on both of them, this is going to be the pure color. You're not adding black or white to it at all. So I'm going to go ahead and get some on my brush and paint it in just that middle square. So you guys remember when we did the grid drawings, we did value scales? And remember we did that in pencil, right? So on the value scale, what's the point of it? What are you showing? Shading, so light to dark, right? So that's gonna be the same thing on here. We're gonna show from light over on this side to dark on this side. So over here, you'll see at the top above it, it says white. And then this one says black, so we're gonna wash our brush off, get any excess water off with a paper towel, and then I'm gonna go ahead and get white and paint this square white. Now, I realize this paper is white, I understand, but I do want you to go ahead and just paint the white in that square. And remember our goal, when we're painting is to stay really neat, control our brush, where the paint is going on the paper. So I'm gonna wash the white out of my brush now and do the same thing with black because we're going from absolute lightest, which in this case is white, to absolute darkest, which is black. So the same as when we did the color wheel demonstration, I'm not gonna make you guys watch me paint all of these solid just because it would take more time, but I am showing you in the demonstration you know how to do that neatly just with these first three. So before you start mixing, this is exactly what you'll do too. You're gonna paint the red pure, the black pure, and the white pure. So now we need to start mixing our tints and shades. Which one would you guys like me to start with? Tints, all right. So if we're to make a tint, we already talked about in the warm-up, you mix together white with whatever color you're using. So if we can think back to the color wheel demonstration, remember that we always start with which color first when we're mixing? The lightest. So that means that between these two, which one do we start with? Obviously white. So I'm gonna scoop aside some white because we'll need more white later. So I'm gonna scoop aside some white and I'm going to add to that white a little bit of the red. So this is pretty light. I'm gonna go ahead and add it here in this box right next to the white. Now we want to, how do we make the next progression? Remember, as we go from here to here, we're getting progressively darker. So how would I make something to go in this square that's gonna be a little bit darker? Add more red, right. Now this is definitely different from that, but I'm gonna add just a little bit more just to have a little bit of a stronger difference. And then that goes here. So we can see a distinct difference from white to pale pink to medium pink to red, correct? All right, so that means now we need to do our shades. In this project, there will not be a time when I want you to mix a color with black and white at the same time. You're only ever gonna mix the color with just white or mix the color with just black. Does anybody happen to know what it's called when you mix a color with black and white? Okay, so black and white together make gray. You are correct about that. But when you mix gray with a color, it's actually called a tone. So it's having that gray mixed in. That's really common when you're painting like a house and the colors inside of a house. It's very rarely like, this is just blue, just pure blue. Usually there's a little bit of black and white in there to tone it down so it's not like super vibrant, crazy looking blue. All right, so we're gonna make shades. If we are mixing together black and red, which color would we start with first? You are so smart, red. So I'm gonna scoop aside some red. Even though this is the last time we're mixing with red, we still wanna have some extra so that if we need to mix in more red to change it, we've got some wiggle room over here. So I'm still scooping aside some red. And because black is such a strong color, it takes just a small amount to make a difference. So I'm just barely gonna tip my brush in the black and start to mix in. And you can tell it drastically changes that color. It almost looks purple now. I'm gonna put just a teeny tiny bit more. What do you call it when you mix black with red? What color is this? Burgundy or maroon, right? That's kind of the common names for this. So this is not super dark, but it's definitely darker than red. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that here. And remember, you're gonna fill the boxes in all the way. This is just an example. And now I'm gonna make it even darker by adding more black. You can see what small amounts of paint I'm using. I still have red left over. I didn't use all this pink, so you really should be able to get through this assignment with just the amount of paint that you're given. You'll probably even have extra. So this is a decent time when we're mixing the darker colors to use a piece of test paper to make sure they look the way that we want them to when they're actually spread on the paper. It looks really dark right here, but when I painted it on the paper, it's not that dark. So I'm gonna add a little bit more black. Well, a lot more black apparently. All right. Oh yeah, see the huge difference? Much better. So I'm gonna paint that here. Again, you're filling in the squares completely, or rectangles, I guess. The only other thing I didn't mention is you need to put your name on this. This is just like the color wheels. They're all gonna kind of look the same when we're finished with them. So in order to keep them separated and make sure that you get credit for your work, please make sure you put your name on it. So when you're finished, you're gonna wash out your brush, take it to the sink. You're gonna take this container to the sink as well and your palette. The brush comes back to me directly, remember? And then you're gonna wash the palette off completely so there's no paint left, and you'll keep it on your shelf and rinse out the water container really well and put it back on the edge of the sink. Then remember, after this, if you're not finished with the color wheel, I'll give you more paint and you can finish the color wheel and get it turned in, and then you need to be working on finishing tracing the hexagon patterns. Any questions? All right, so if you'll give me a second, I'm gonna get your materials distributed.